In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Please be seated. You know what an identity crisis is? It's when you don't know who you are anymore. And I'm not talking about amnesia. It's not that you've forgotten your name. You remember your name. You know where you live. You know where you work. You know where you are, at least geographically. But you suddenly feel like knowing all those things about yourself doesn't really tell you who you are. Who am I really? And where am I really? And why am I even here? And what am I supposed to be doing? And what am I missing? I can't seem to find myself. That's an experience that happens to most people from time to time. It happens to some people more often than others, maybe. I think it probably happens to people who live in our time and place more often than it's happened to people who have lived in other times and places. Because our culture places such a high value, almost an unheard of value, on personal choice and individual freedom. And we don't believe anybody ought to be telling anybody else who they are. And we don't believe anybody's race or color or gender or economic strata ought to tell anybody who they are or who they can be. We really do believe that who I am and who you are is for us, each of us, to discover for ourselves without anybody getting in the way. And that belief in that freedom is fairly unique to our culture. Okay. Given all that incredible freedom our culture gives us, and given the wide range of possibilities and all the possible options, well, you know how it is when you go to the store to get something, and you get to the store and you find that what you're looking for comes in 32 different flavors? Having all those options can be paralyzing. If who I am is an open question, and it's up to me to fill in the blank, doesn't it stand to reason that I'm going to have an identity crisis once in a while? Okay, that's where we are today, I think. But identity crisis has always been a part of the human experience. If you've ever read ancient literature, and you probably did if you ever went to high school, ancient literature is full of stories about people who go on journeys to discover themselves, to discover why they're here and what they're supposed to do and what their destinies are supposed to be. We don't immediately recognize those stories as stories about identity crisis because ancient writers don't use the same psychological jargon that we use. But that's what those stories are about. Because people have always recognized that the fundamental adventure of life is discovering who you are. Ancient pagan literature is full of stories like that. Ancient Hebrew literature is full of stories like that. The Bible is full of stories about people who are trying to figure out who they are. This morning's Old Testament lesson is an excerpt from one of those stories. Okay, it's just that this story isn't about a particular person. It's about a people who don't know who they are. Children of Israel are having an identity crisis. What provokes the crisis is a catastrophic loss. They've lost a war. And the survivors of that war have been deported to a foreign country. So, they've lost their land. They've lost their homes. They've lost their property. They've lost their livelihoods. Many of them have lost their families. Almost every one of them has lost at least one significant loved one. And the prevailing feeling among that people is that they've lost God. Okay. What they've lost are relationships to things and to people that have always told them who they are. They've always known themselves as the children of God. That's over. They've always known themselves as the children of Israel. Israel has been dissolved. They've always known themselves as shepherds, or farmers, or herdsmen, or craftsmen, or merchants. Now they're unemployed. They've always known themselves as husbands, or wives, or parents, or children. Now many of them are widows, or widowers, or orphans. Okay, they knew themselves on the inside in relationship to people, roles, and things on the outside. As soon as their outside environment got messed with, they lost touch with who they were on the inside. Okay, that's how it is for all of us. Even modern people like us, our environment, our work, and the people around us tell us who we are. Okay, they may tell us that directly or indirectly. What they tell us may be true or false, but that they tell us is indisputable. It begins almost at the very beginning. At the very beginning, our parents practically dictate to us who we are. Our parents give us a bunch of genetic material, and then our parents give us names, and then our parents begin telling us over and over again, explicitly or implicitly, who we are. God willing, we had parents who told us over and over again who we are by telling us, "You are my child, and I love you, and I will always love you." That message, delivered over and over again, gives a child a strong, stable sense of identity. But my first clues about who I am are coming to me from the outside. Okay, some parents, as we know, unfortunately under-communicate the message. Some parents, unfortunately, over-communicate the message. Some parents so dictate the identity of their children to their children, it practically destroys the child's sense of identity. You will be an honor roll student. You will make the varsity basketball team. You will go to college. You will go to med school. You will be a doctor. You will get married and give me a bunch of grandchildren. Okay, our first clues about who we are come to us from the outside. But if who we are is dictated to us from the outside, that doesn't create a strong, stable sense of identity. That creates an unstable, insecure sense of identity. Because we feel like the people who are talking to us don't know who we are, which makes us feel like we don't know who we are. Because somebody is forcing us into a mold. Okay, our culture is in reaction to that. And I, for one, am thankful for that. I am thankful I grew up in a culture that gave me all kinds of freedom to discover for myself and to experiment with who I am. Okay? Many, if not most of my experiments turned out to be failures. But I am still thankful for most of them anyway. Most of them turned out to be good learning experiences for me. The freedom our culture gives us to do that is unique, and we ought not take it for granted. But we do tend in our culture to mythologize that freedom. And we make it out that we are free to decide for ourselves, by ourselves, who we are in total isolation. That's just not true. Human beings aren't like that. The only real alternative to discovering who we are in relationship to our environment and to other people is to decide who we are in reaction against all those people. Which, if you think about it, is just another way of letting all those people dictate to us. Okay, sooner or later, healthy, growing human beings learn to differentiate themselves from other people, from their families, from their friends, from their work, and from the place they happen to live. But it remains that these people and this environment are the mediums through which we discover who we are. And the truth is that our culture, for all its love of freedom, is full of voices that are constantly trying to tell us who we are or who we must be. Take the advertising industry. If you like, just take the advertising that's geared to children. Have you ever listened to any of that? Advertisers are constantly telling our sons and our daughters who they are, or who they must be if they ever wish to be someone. Some of the things they're telling their sons and daughters are just advertising. You ever listen to what the advertising industry is telling us about who we are, or who we must be? I think we all tend to believe that if you have an identity crisis, there must be something wrong with you. Okay, sometimes an identity crisis is a sign there might be something wrong with you. But I think if we never have an identity crisis, there must be something wrong with us. It is good periodically to stop and ask ourselves, who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I here at all? What am I missing? It is good to do that because it is really easy to lose your own identity in the world today, or even in your own family, without even noticing it. Without even noticing it, our identities can become dictated to us by people and by things that have no right to do that. We are never going to get away from knowing ourselves in relationship to other people and to our work and to our environment. But we are free to decide for ourselves which of those voices telling us who we are we going to believe. Okay, one of the voices is telling us this: you are my child, and I will always love you. I don't know if you've heard that voice lately, but that's the voice that speaks in the Old Testament lesson today. That's the voice of God speaking to people having an identity crisis. Did you hear what he told them? You are my children. I made you. I formed you. And, he says, I am forming you. Where you are today, how you are today, isn't where and how you are going to be forever, but who you are. Who you are to me, that's forever. You are my beloved child. With you, I am well pleased. That's the same voice in the gospel this morning. That's what God tells Jesus at his baptism. But that's what God tells us each at our baptisms. You are my beloved son, or you are my beloved daughter. With you, I am well pleased. Okay, there's a lot of different ways to think about baptism. One way to think about baptism is as the endowment, or the restoration, or the reassurance of a personal identity. Who we are to God. Okay, on one hand, well, there is also this in the baptismal rite. There is a set of renunciations. We renounce the world, the flesh, and the devil, and every other coercive voice that either tells us we're something we're not, or tells us we can never be who we truly are. We renounce those voices. We accept instead the voice of God who tells us, you are my children, and I will always love you. Okay, on one hand, that tells us almost everything we need to know ourselves. And on the other hand, it dictates so little. God does not tell us we have to be honor roll students. He doesn't tell us we have to make the varsity team. He doesn't tell us we have to go to college. He doesn't tell us we have to get married. He doesn't tell us where we have to go to work or where we have to live. All those things are left for us to discover for ourselves. Not by ourselves, but for ourselves, in right relationship with others, and in right relationship with God. Okay. What he dictates is who he is to us and who we are to him. All the other blanks are for us to fill in. He doesn't take away from us the fundamental adventure of life. What he gives us is a strong, stable, personal identity that can withstand all the changes and chances of life, all the disorienting surprises, and all the devastating losses that leave us wondering, who am I? And where am I? And why? Baptism does not prevent identity crisis. Identity crises are going to come for us from time to time because things do change. People do change. Jobs change. Careers are lost. Friends move away. Loved ones die. Each of those appropriately calls who we are into a little bit of question. Baptism does not prevent identity crisis. What baptism does is it suggests another question for us to ask when the crisis comes. Instead of asking ourselves, who am I? Because that is a settled question for us. We can ask ourselves, how am I? And if we are in the middle of a crisis, the answer to that is probably not very well. Things aren't good today. I'm not good today. And if that's the truth, that's good for us to know. But knowing who I am, I can handle that truth about how I am. Because who I am to God isn't going to change. How I am is bound to change. And God can change it. And that changes the nature of the crisis. That changes the crisis into the adventure.